for. Are you looking for Reagan? Are you looking for Reagan? He burns in hell! Reagan strong!
What do you think evil is? I'll tell you what I think it is. We're born in this world with hope and dreams and a desire to be happy.
Dad?
Something's going on with my daughter.
No! No!
It's happening to my daughter, too.
The devil has one wish.
Wherever those girls went, they brought something back with them.
To make us lose faith.
But I believe you can help get our daughters back.
To kill it in us. And the devil never gives up.
She knows who I am. Where's the other girl?
She's waiting for you.
What you're doing here is dangerous. People have died on both sides of possession.
Come home, baby. Come back to us, okay?
If you don't make it, I don't make it.
Mama!
What is it, baby?
I can't hear you.
Baby, I'm right here.
I don't want to go to hell!
Good. Play that trick on you.
There are 2 heartbeats. Is it working?
They're beating in sync.
Be strong. What did you do?
One girl lives, one girl dies.
You get to choose.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike. Joining me, as always, it's Venom.
Greetings and salutations, true believers. Yeah, I am doing pretty well. I probably could be in a better mood right now, but we'll talk about that in a little bit.
All right. Related to the not, we'll find out shortly. Also with us, it's Don and Nelly. How's it going?
Fuck you both, Jason Blum and David Gordon Green.
All right. Getting things out of the way early, so...
We're not out of the way early yet. That's we're not getting anything out of the way early here.
That's just Don starting up the engine.
Yeah. If that doesn't give it away, then we are covering The Exorcist Believer for this Fresh Cuts. And let's see, an hour and 51 minutes, rated R. Synopsis is as follows. When 2 girls disappear into the woods and return 3 days, what happened to them? The father of one seeks out Chris McNeil, who's been forever altered by what happened to her daughter 50 years ago. So, yes, this is the 6 or something movie in this franchise, but this is written like it's a direct sequel to the original. I don't think it's really taking anything else in the franchise into account unless there was something in here that references them. I've only seen all the other ones. Well, I've seen 1 and 3 a lot, but most of the other ones I've only seen like once when they came out to see them. But so if anything else is getting referenced to those, I probably wouldn't have caught it. But with that said, we're going to get general thoughts going, or further thoughts. initial thoughts. So Venom, I'll kick it. The Exorcist Believer, let's hear it.
All right, well, for those who don't know, The Exorcist is my favorite film of all time, regardless of genre. It's not just my favorite horror film of all time. It is my favorite movie of all time. So obviously there's going to be some heightened expectations when you attach the name The Exorcist on a film. And I think that's the first mistake that this movie makes. If this movie would have been a standalone movie, if it was just David Gordon Green doing an exorcism film, I definitely would not have hated it the way I walked out of the theater hating this one. I mean, I don't even know where to start with this movie. The first thing I'm going to say is nothing in the movie is necessarily terrible. Like, I wasn't rolling my eyes constantly. I wasn't cringing at some of the acting or the line delivery. As far as the filmmaking, the storytelling, the performances, it's all pretty much middle of the road. But that's where I have the biggest issue, is that this is The Exorcist. And The Exorcist should never, ever have a middle of the road sequel. That just doesn't make sense to me. I'll start with the positives, and there are a few, so I won't be long. I thought the performances of our two main girls were fine. Maybe a little cliche exorcism, and that's also probably going to be one of my biggest complaints about this movie, is that this is the most basic bitch exorcism movie I think I've ever seen. Like, every goddamn exorcism cliche you could think of is in here, and it's done the same way we've seen it before. Oh, there's two girls that are possessed this time. It's so much different. No, it fucking isn't. But like I said, the performances of the two girls were fine. I feel like it was a lot more obvious here that their quote-unquote possessed voices were voiceovers and not the actual girls' voices. It was a little bit less obvious in the original Exorcist, to the point where Linda Blair actually got a supporting actress Oscar nomination for the film, and then just before the Oscars occurred, it was found out that she didn't actually do her voiceover, that it was the Mercedes lady. So obviously here it's a little bit more obvious that it's not these girls doing it, so it kind of takes you out of it a little bit. I have no major issues with the performances. The story, the influx of other religious iconography and methodologies and things like that was interesting on paper, because it's definitely one of those questions that people have probably asked over the decades. What happens if you're not Catholic? I mean, can you even be possessed if you're not Catholic? Or, and this one kind of addresses that at least a little bit, in the sense that there's more than just a Catholic priest at our eventual exorcism at the end of the film. So they tried to do something original here, but ultimately it falls flat. I don't care about any character in this movie. I cared so greatly about Reagan, about Chris, about Damian Karras in the original. In this movie, I literally don't give a shit about anybody here. They don't make anyone here worthy of my backing, my rooting for, whatever the case may be. Yes, there are solid protagonists here, actually likable protagonists too, but ultimately, by the time the shit hits the fan, we've spent so little time, because this is split up amongst two families, because it is two girls that are possessed, you never really get enough time with either family. Obviously, you spend more time with the black family, with, I forget the character's name, Angela. So Angela's family, because her dad is a widower and he had to make a hard decision when his wife, got an injury while pregnant, which, is kind of a catalyst for, it's a major plot point in the film later on. Oh man, I feel like I'm disjointed here because there's just so much to complain about. The fucking movie is called The Exorcist. Where was The Exorcist? There is no goddamn exorcist in this movie. If you want to talk about the ineffectual Catholic priest who gets dispatched 30 seconds after showing up, I'll slap you in the fucking face if you're going to tell me that's the titular exorcist. And then the other one isn't even a real licensed exorcist. It's not even a holy person. It's a former person of the cloth who dabbles or has read stories and read Christmas Neil's book, so she thinks she's an expert. Yet you have the unmitigated balls to call this The Exorcist. Fuck you. I'm right there with Don. Fuck David Gordon Green and Jason Blum for sticking the Exorcist tag on this. I feel like the only reason they stuck the Exorcist tag on this film was to give us that little tiny piece of fan service at the end of the film, which I will fully admit, as an old Exorcist fan, it's my favorite part of the movie. but ultimately it's a throwaway scene that has very little bearing on the rest of the movie. It really just has more bearing on the original film than anything else. So I just, it's funny because I started this review by saying nothing is inherently bad in this movie. It's just all so boring and, you know, been there, done that I question, why did this movie even need to be made? Like, what was the motivation other than money? Obviously money. But my God, this is not a quality film. This is not a sequel that The Exorcist deserves. And ultimately, The Exorcist has only really gotten one great sequel. Exorcist 2, Dominion, and The Beginning all kind of suck anyway. Obviously, Exorcist 3, in my opinion, is one of the greatest horror sequels ever. But that's a discussion for another show. This movie is just so middle of the road and basic that literally as I'm walking out of the theater, there are these young girls. I saw the movie in a row where there were these teenage girls that, you know, I'm an old man, so it's hard for me to gauge, you know, teenage girls' age. They could have been anything from 15 to 22 for all I know. But as we're walking out of the theater, they're all raving about this movie, talking about how great it is and how good they thought it was and everything else. And I'm just like, oh, you sweet summer child. I have so many sights to show you if you think this was a great exorcism movie. I don't even know where to go on from here. Like I said, I can't give this movie much merit. It's not a good exorcism movie. It's not a good Exorcist movie. It's not gory. It's not bloody. Not that The Exorcist was ever really gory or bloody, but just we needed something more to put this over the top, and we didn't get it. And I think, and the problem, another major problem is that this movie opened the same weekend as a far superior possession movie came out this weekend, which we'll probably be talking about. If we don't talk about it on Fresh Cuts in the coming weeks, I can guarantee we're going to talk about it at our top 10 show at the end of the year. But aside from that, when you put out one of the best exorcism movies I've seen since Metamorphosis, and then the same weekend you put out Basic Bitch Believer, what an absolute travesty. And what's funny is that they moved the release date of this movie to not go up against Taylor Swift. And you ended up kicking yourself in the balls even harder by going up against a far superior demonic possession movie. So, yeah, all in all, I can't recommend this movie to really anybody. I guess if you're a 16-year-old kid who hasn't watched that many exorcism movies, you might like this. But if you're a fan of the original Exorcist, of Exorcist 3, or of any of the great innovative exorcism movies that we've gotten since then, you know, Exorcism of Emily Rose, the aforementioned Metamorphosis, like, those movies are legitimately innovative. What we got today out of The Exorcist Believer was literally, it felt like a Shudder movie. And which 2 years ago, that would have been a compliment. But in 2023, not so much a compliment to be called a Shudder movie. But yeah, this felt like a Shudder movie to me. Something that I absolutely should not have had to go to the theater to watch. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm going to rant and rave here for hours if I don't shut up. So I'm going to go ahead and leave my general thoughts here and just say, as a hardcore Exorcist fan, I just hated this movie. And as a cinephile in general, aside from the exorcism part of it, this is just a middle of the road, just basic movie. It doesn't offer anything new, nothing innovative. It doesn't, you know, break the mold. It doesn't reinvent the wheel. It does nothing to merit the title The Exorcist. I will leave it at that for now.
All right, and for 180 positive take, Dawn, what did you think of them? Just kidding. What do you got, Dawn?
Okay, so I guess I'll start off with my thoughts on this. I've made it no secret that I am not the most devout follower of the original. I've seen it once. I don't remember what cut it is. I know I've seen all of the, director's cut, version you've never seen before sequences. I've seen the spider walk. I've seen all the blood splitting. I've seen all of the excess stuff. I know I've seen that here and there in my life. Maybe it's, talking head documentaries. Maybe it's, in the version I actually legitimately did see. I don't know. I wish I had the energy, the compunction, the will to go back and revisit the original. And this one may have done it because, god damn, I wish I could say there's something positive to this. And I'm inclined to believe that, the studio sheen that permeates everything here is probably the best part of this. It looks fine. There's nothing here that really looks obviously bad or low budget. The makeup work is serviceable, I suppose. The exorcism sequence has some energy to it with everything that's going on, everybody ranting and raving in different dialects, and the scene has some energy and momentum to it, but jeez, the story is just an absolute train wreck. I don't know why we're following each of these two families. There's nothing about them that's even remotely interesting. There's nothing about either of them that really draws me in or makes me care about what happens to them. The little girls can go diddle themselves in the woods for all I care, and I couldn't give a fuck. The basic idea could be serviceable, I suppose. I mean, the idea that they go off in the woods, they disappear, and then they're found days later. They have no memory of what's going on. All the tests that are going on to figure out what's happened to them. The early aftermath of their, reappearance and, all of that other stuff. There's a germ of an idea, I suppose, that could be intriguing. But then everything else is just so bland and stupid. There's very little about it that actually makes you think that they're actually worthy of, an exorcism, because there's no time for any of that to be established in here. The, bringing in the Catholic priest and, all of the other various religions that they do here is ham-fisted beyond belief. It's as if, it's called The Exorcist. We're supposed to be able to, have that exorcism sequence. So, yeah, okay, you're a priest. Let's go bring you in. And that's literally as deeply as they thought about the Exorcist, overall. He was literally the only person standing around in a church and said, hey, you're a priest. Let's go perform an exorcism. And it's, it has no emotional impact and no bearing on what's going on, because that's literally as deep as the whole thing goes. And the story, like I said, makes no sense. None of the characters are interesting. And then the fan service. I mean, I don't know what's worse. The treatment of Sally Hardesty in Texas Chainsaw 2022, the treatment of the characters in Scream 5, or the treatment of Chris in this. I mean, is she even necessary to this? I mean, good God, you could have filmed her scenes in a day. Like, was she necessary? Did she move the plot along? Did she stay more than a day to film her sequences? I mean, there was no reason for her to be there. There was no reason for anything that was brought up in any of the discussions that couldn't have been found online through a, Wikipedia article or some interview, pulled up on some random website from 10 years ago. There was nothing that she needed to be there for. And it just felt like, fan service for fan service sake. And the way that she's dispatched in this, which I'm going to leave it at just, saying that for spoiler's sake, but that just felt like an ultimate slap in the face. And I can't imagine that, anybody that's actually a fan of the originals would have any kind of, appreciation for the way that happens. The Linda Blair cameo is, that's literally what it is. But yeah, just the treatment of the original. You don't even bring up anybody else that happened in the original films. Exorcist 3 is a more legitimate sequel than this, because it legitimately and genuinely brings in the characters from the original to, continue their story. Like, I don't know. I feel disjointed. I feel distracted. I feel scattershot just because the way that this shit stain of a film made me feel. And I cannot support the saying that this came out the same week as When Evil Lurks, and you have the balls to think that this is going to compete with Taylor Swift on the heels of her dating some NFL star. Like, you're seriously concerned? You're seriously concerned about this thing underperforming? Fuck you, Jason Blum. You've officially lost me now. So yeah, I think I'll just leave it here for now, because I'm gonna be all over the place and I don't really feel the need to. And considering the opening statements and previously mentioned sayings from our chats, I think I'll just stop here and let the fireworks fly. Mike, take over and please give us something entertaining, because I know that you want to rant about this even worse than Venom does.
No, he doesn't.
All right. Well, I mean, I'll start off by saying I don't disagree with anything said so far. Venom, you talked about the girls on the way out of the theater. There was a young group of girls, I think it was like 2 or 3, that were like sitting in my row. And I honestly think like the only audience for this movie is like the younger crowd that either hasn't seen The Exorcist or just kind of that new school mentality that they don't find anything before like the year 2000 like good. Like for some reason in their head they just think if it's old that it's just not good. Other than that, I don't know who this movie is for, because oh my god, like I feel like one of the problems, it comes off like every new school generic demon possession movie that like studios make. There's nothing really interesting. I knew going in because of trailers that it was going to be 2 girls instead of 1. So I was like, okay, what are they going to do with that? Really nothing. There's really no reason. All that did was it hurt the movie because, like as already mentioned, you're kind of splitting your time between the 2 of them in the background and the family. I think obviously Lydia, her and her dad get a little more like time and development. We get a little more background on her versus what's the other girl? Catherine? Is that
Catherine? Yeah.
Catherine. She's kind of just there because I guess she was with Lydia, and obviously she has parents, so they got to be a part of it. To me, yeah, I'm putting Exorcist on this. Okay, one of the things I think the original does in a beautiful way is it gets subtext across with conversation with the backgrounds of characters, where this movie trades that in for monologues, and everything is so on the nose. Like we even get that epilogue at the end. I think it's Ann Dowd's character. Well, I guess her name in the movie is Ann too, but it played by Ann Dowd, who I actually like Ann Dowd as an actress, and she's showed up in like various horror movies over the last handful of years. But in this, we get this monologue at the end, and I'm like, what's the purpose of this? Like, why are we hearing, like, this is what we hear in like your generic Exorcist movies, but in The Exorcist, like, there's no need for scenes and dialogue like this. We don't need this exposition. Let's go to the fan service stuff, as Don would put it. What's Ellen Burstyn doing in this movie? There's nothing she does that's consequential to anything. Like, she could disappear from this movie and nothing would have played out different except like stuff that happens to her specifically. Mm-hmm. Why does she even show up? Like, why does she show up? To confront any, like, what's she gonna, like, what's her expertise? What's her, I don't even understand why she's not there in the movie specifically, but why she's there in the room and like trying to do anything. I'm like, what? What's
my guess? My guess, and this could just be speculation. The original point was for everything there to have been Reagan, but Linda didn't want to return to the franchise, so they wrote it for her instead. I don't know if that would have made the movie better, but that's my initial idea, was that it was supposed to have been Reagan instead. because she's literally the one that went through it. She would have been the one that had all the experience. I mean, Chris just stood off to the sidelines and did nothing, from what I remember at least. I mean, Venom, you can correct me on that, but from what I remember, she stood on the sidelines and didn't really do anything. So for me, it made more sense that the character was supposed to have been Reagan, and then when Linda Blair didn't want to return to it, and beyond doing the cameo, they changed it into bringing back Chris's character.
Yeah, I mean, Ellen Burstyn even has a line in this movie where she even says, "I wasn't a part of the exorcism. They wouldn't let me in." So she's actually admitting that she doesn't really know what she's talking about.
That's what I was basing it on, that specific line. Yeah, so yeah, thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah. And what's with our like holy Avengers at the end, where like they all, like, these people show up and they're more useless than the townspeople of Haddonfield trying to kill Michael Myers. Like, I don't know what that was all about, and like why they thought that was a good idea. And of course, nothing works. And I'm still not even 100% sure what they did to actually exorcise Satan or whatever. Like, I know literally what they did, but I don't know why that is something that would work. Like, it felt like they were just like, all right, this is the part of the movie that we have to have a resolution, so the demon will be exorcised. Explain to me how you build a trilogy off this movie, because I don't understand. Like, at least with Halloween 2018, like, regardless of how much you liked it or didn't like it, it felt like a genuine part one to a trilogy. Like, you could build off of it. Maybe their plans for this trilogy is just 3 unrelated stories, and maybe they throw in fan service in each one to connect them. But otherwise, I'm like, this doesn't feel like a first movie of a trilogy. Hopefully it's not. I mean, hopefully they reconsider after this movie. What
supposedly,
else
if Facebook is to be concerned, there's stories going around that he may not direct the next ones. I don't know if there's any validity to those, but
yeah. The other thing is, like, they get rid of, like, really building, and this could go back to, like, the fact that since there's 2 girls, and they kind of had to split their time between what's going on with both of them, but we really don't get, like, the slow development of, like, the possession, where, like, we get, like, maybe a night where they come home from the trauma and they exhibit a little bit of, like, odd behavior, but then, like, within, like, a day, it's like, okay, now we're, like, fully realized possessed kids. And I was like, whoa, that was, like, quick. Like, what the hell's going on? And, like, I think it's already been mentioned, the priest is not much of a character in this. He's just kind of shows up and he's like, all right, I guess I'll help, but there's no, like, development there. Oh man, I don't know, it just feels way too generic to even throw the Exorcist name on it. And it feels like, yeah, it's just like they knew if they said, oh, it's an Exorcist sequel, then a certain amount of people would automatically go see it, if not for anything else but curiosity, and to see, oh, Ellen Burstyn's in it, okay, well, maybe it'll be cool to see her. I think she's 91 years old now. She wasn't bad, but it just didn't seem like much of a reason for her to be there. She probably got paid a lot, and I think she got them to agree to do, like, that scholarship for young actors. So good for her for negotiating and something good. Like Venom said, I don't think the actors themselves, I don't think anyone was necessarily bad. They just didn't have a lot to work with this script. It felt like another fly-by-night script where it's like, okay, it's an Exorcist movie, so here's our checklist of things that people might expect in an Exorcist movie. But other than that, man, it was just kind of generic and uninteresting. It felt very by the book of what you would expect in a modern movie. It didn't do much to challenge anything about anything. I don't know. It's kind of a dull movie to me, and there was parts that you knew they were taking cues from the original, but they almost, like, tamed it down. Like, in the original, you have that scene with, like, Reagan coming down the stairs and she, like, just straight pees on the floor, and in this one they kind of, like, reference, oh, look, the same thing's happening to them, but it's like they just one of them gets woken up and say, oh, I think you wet the bed. Now, I'm not saying, like, give me the pee scene. Like, it's not like I was yearning to watch a girl pee, but it's just It's just the fact that like they don't, I don't know if dumb down's the right word, but they almost like homogenize it to make it less like risky or less controversial because we want to build, we want this to be a big money maker and the first of a trilogy, and we can't do anything too controversial in our demon possession exorcism movie. But it's a demon possession exorcism movie. Yes, you can. Like, you should, as evidenced by the Superior movie that we all saw. So, I don't know. Like, I've heard, to the credit of most of the audience, most people are pretty down on it. I have seen like a small fraction be like, oh, it's not that bad, or even a smaller fraction even try to argue that it's good. I don't know what the hell movie they saw, but I'm not, if they liked it, cool. But it seems like the consensus on this one is with us not very good, and I'd be interested to see what happens with the rest of the trilogy if they still go forward with it. But other than that, I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, I mean, to Mike's point, I 100% agree. This movie has no teeth. The original Exorcist had teeth. It made you uncomfortable. There were scenes in it that literally made you turn your head. Maybe not necessarily because of the gore, but just because of whatever the situation being portrayed on screen. Obviously, Reagan masturbating with a crucifix, the angioplasty in the movie, which, from what I've heard, had made people faint back in 1974. And it is pretty gnarly, even to this day, to actually see that in a film, to see a little girl go through that. But yeah, this movie has no teeth at all. And just when you think it's about to, like there's one scene in a church where Catherine starts to diddle herself in the church. I'm thinking, oh, here it comes. We're going to get this big, psychosexual scene. And nope. They just leave it at that. Literally, we just see her hand go down or into her dress really quick. A couple of other kids in the church notice, but then she disappears, and that's the end of it. It's like this movie is beyond neutered. Mike was being generous by calling it neutered. I mean, this movie is just lame. It really is the best word for it. Lame as all hell.
Yeah, and let's talk about the actual girls once they're possessed. I just feel like they don't do anything interesting like the way Reagan did in the original. Like, you've already referenced some of the more graphic stuff, but even a simple scene like the scene where Father Karras gets the vision of his mom and like the guilt for putting her in the old folks home, and she's like talking to him. In this one, the most we get related is, okay, the possessed girls talk in like disembodied voices a little bit about like, I think, whoever's related to whoever's in the room, but it's like so bland and like it's like, man, like, do something interesting here. Like, I just don't know what exactly they thought I don't know, like it just feels very tame.
Yeah, it definitely, I mean, the movie's still rated R, probably more for language than anything else, but it still feels like a PG-13 Exorcist film to me. Just wow. God, what else? What the hell else? I mean, that doesn't involve spoilers. I mean, like I said, these families that we barely spend any time with, we don't really spend enough time to care about much of anybody. Victor, Angela's dad is probably the only one that maybe you might develop some kind of connection with, but ultimately we barely spend any time with him too. Even though we spend more time with him than Catherine's family, it's still so disjointed that you never develop an emotional bond with anyone in this movie. And like Mike said, there were those great scenes with Father Karras in the original that made us care about this character, that actually made us feel for this character. And then when he makes his ultimate sacrifice at the end of the original, it's that much more impactful. Here, it really, nothing, there's no impact here whatsoever. We get no indication of, is this Pazuzu? I mean, yeah, there are different people claiming that it's the same thing. Obviously, Chris McNeil, when she first confronts one of the possessed girls, actually says, "I know you." And the possessed, mentions Reagan and knows stuff about Chris that the little girl shouldn't. But that could still be any demon. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's Pazuzu. And obviously, when we get the shots of like different demonic faces throughout the movie, none of them look like, Pazuzu. So they potentially could be a different demon, which is fine. I don't need Pazuzu necessarily. It's a minor complaint. What I'm saying is just, like I said, they tried to incorporate Chris McNeil in that one scene. Like, I think that's the main reason she's in this movie, was for that scene when she confronts Catherine and they have that conversation, the back and forth about Reagan and everything that Chris has gone through and blah, blah, blah. But it still has such little impact on the overall outcome of the film that it's basically a throwaway scene. Other than a fairly gnarly injury at the end, which again, kind of just disrespect to a legacy character, like Don mentioned earlier. I don't know what's going on with these these modern day directors that are doing remakes and sequels of classic horror movies, bringing back original characters and then absolutely disrespecting them. What the fuck? Does fan service not mean anything to you? Like, if David Gordon Green's ultimate goal was to alienate every fan of the original, then bravo, my friend, you fucking did it. You've alienated all of us, because this is now the second horror franchise that, in many of our opinions, you've ruined. So, of course he's not going to do the next two movies in the franchise. He has to go ruin Nightmare on Elm Street for Mike. And then he'll probably remake Zombie and ruin that for Don. So, this guy just has a track record. And this is one of those guys where, like, I don't understand how people are still giving this guy money to make movies. Like horror in October is going to make money. I understand that. People crave it in October. People not like us, people in the community who watch horror all year, but the people who look at October as spooky season, they're the ones going to the theater and spending a lot of money, and it justifies these just sacrilegious, no pun intended, sequels and remakes that we keep getting. It's so unfortunate. And then to hear the younger generation praise these movies, god damn it. Look, there's a generation gap with every generation. There always is. And it's something, as I get older, it's something that I have to accept. Not every 20-year-old is going to agree with me on The Exorcist and Dawn of the Dead and Zombie and, the original Nightmare. There's going to be that generation gap where, they like the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre better than the original. They like the new Fog better than the original. Just because, like Mike said, there's that mentality that if it's old, it's crap. And that's such a shitty fucking mentality. But ultimately, I dare say a lot of us probably had it. It's just like a rite of passage. When we're young, we think everything that's new is awesome. Everything that's old is crap. And it's unfortunate when that gets transferred into the cinema. And, I see all these kids spending their hard-earned money for these subpar movies and then praising them. It's like, part of me is jealous that they enjoyed the movie so much more than I did, and then part of me just wants to slap them in the mouth and, like, what is wrong with you? Snap out of it. There are better movies than this. Just because this one was shiny and in beautiful 4K with Dolby sound doesn't make it better than the original in and of itself. I mean, there's still storytelling, there's still performances, editing, everything else that makes a film great. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and in the original, wasn't it, I don't know if it's a matter of fact or if it was implied or just a theory, that Reagan was actually possessed. Well, she played with the Ouija board and got possessed, right. But wasn't it to get at Marin, because the demon kind of wanted to get at Marin for, like, their previous battle, where in this one, like, was there any actual goal of the demon other than, like, fuck around with two kids? Like, and in the original, like, yeah, and obviously, in 2023, sure, a Ouija board being a conduit might be a little cheesy. In 73, it was appropriate. But are you telling? So in this one, it was a candle and a necklace, and that, and like them, like, I don't understand, like, even what brought on the possession to begin with.
Unless that was something they were planning. Unless they were planning on
Go ahead, Dom.
well, my thing is that they were probably planning on explaining that in the further sequels. Because I mean, remember, this is still a trilogy, so some of that, could have been, the intention was explain it later on. But I mean, if for a standalone film, you still have to make some sense.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, not to derail you, but no. Hearing you say that, my initial goal is to just say, okay, part one of a franchise, they were at least originally planning on explaining that in later entries. I'm not saying that they were, but that could have been an in-game goal.
I'll concede that that's a possibility, but every great trilogy starts with a great first part. That not every trilogy leaves open-ended and unanswered questions at the end of it. I mean, look at The Matrix. The Matrix could have been a standalone movie, and it would have been fine. We many of us would have loved it. And then they gave us the trilogy because the trilogy was already planned when they, wrote the original. And it's the same thing now with these kind of movies, with the new Halloween trilogy, the planned trilogy for this movie. It's like they're thinking too far ahead, but they're not concentrating on the task at hand, which is this movie. Make this movie a cohesive story from beginning to end. And then if you want to add more backstory, more color, things like that to the mythology, then you can do that in subsequent chapters afterwards. But you still have to give us some sense of a complete story. And Mike is 100% right. This whole, excuse me, I called it a hole. That was Freudian, but it's kind of true. This movie is full of holes. And it basically is one big hole because none of us can fathom why this movie was even made. Like I said, other than money. But it just, wow. I don't know. I guess we can get into the spoiler section because I like I said, I'm just going to sit here and rant for a couple of hours, and I'd really rather not do that. This is the first week I feel good after having COVID. I don't want to relapse because of a terrible movie. So, anything else you guys want to add before we get into spoilers?
This movie made me feel spoiled, like as in spoiled rotten.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not in a good way.
Yeah, it's true, man, because this year my theme for 31 Days of October is just my favorite movies. I decided to take it easy. I talked about this on a previous episode. Because I had COVID in September, I didn't want to get into too many crazy themes, so I just decided I'm just going to watch the best of the best, my favorites, my ultimate favorites. And to watch some of those favorites and then to have to watch The Exorcist Believer in between them is so disheartening. And it's not just because it's the only new movie. I mean, as we've all said, we saw When Evil Lurks yesterday, or most of us saw it this weekend, and that fucking movie. It's a travesty that we're not talking about that one, but ultimately, since it didn't have as wide a release as The Exorcist, it kind of made sense to go with this one. But folks, if When Evil Lurks is playing anywhere near you, yes, it's in Spanish. Yes, you're going to have to read subtitles, blah, blah, blah. Yes, it has kind of an odd ending where it's kind of open-ended. But aside from all that, the fucking film is brilliant. And it is the sheer definition of an innovative demonic possession movie. They did things that were so much different with the possessed, with the extra. Oh God, I can't even get into it without really getting into story plot points. But just take our word for it, folks. You want to watch an innovative possession movie? Watch the new one from Damien Rugna, who, of course, was the director of Terrified, one of my all-time favorite Spanish-language films, so it makes sense that I love this one, too. But anyway, back to the movie at hand. This is going to end up turning into the When Evil Lurks review if we don't be careful.
Don't worry, I'm sure we'll talk about it soon enough.
Oh, yeah. Way sooner than later, I hope. All right, Exorcist Believer. Our movie opens up in Haiti, of all places. It's weird because when the movie opened up in Haiti, I'm like, oh no, they're not going to bring a voodoo angle into all this, are they? Luckily, no, they do not. It's just a setting. Our main character, Victor Fielding, is there with his new wife. She is very, very pregnant. She looks like she's 8 or 9 months pregnant. I mean, her belly is gigantic. While in Haiti, an earthquake, a major earthquake occurs, and unfortunately, Victor's wife suffers an injury. At the hospital, Victor is informed that the doctors cannot save both the wife and the daughter, and that he's going to have to make a difficult decision. The doctor explains to him that anything that we do to save your wife's life is going to adversely affect the fetus, or vice versa. Anything we do to save the fetus is going to be bad for your wife. So you have to pick one. We don't see the husband actually make his choice, but then the film skips forward 13 years. We see Victor once again working as a professional photographer, which he was taking pictures when he was in Haiti. So he was probably a professional photographer back then too. And he now has a 13-year-old daughter named Angela, played by Lydia Jewett. And, obviously he is a widower. She is his daughter. And basically, it's a fairly basic relationship. They show them having a good time, some nice character development. Eventually, Angela ends up going to school. We end up meeting Catherine, who is her kind of best friend. They are making plans to go do something after school. Angela tells her father that she's going to be at Catherine's house. Catherine tells her parents that they're going to be at another girl's house. And ultimately, what they ended up doing was they ended up going into the woods. And as Mike mentioned previously, they decided to play this kind of game where they're using a candle and a necklace. And I think they're really using the necklace as a pendulum, almost like a hypnotism type thing. Potentially, though, the necklace could have been, because the two girls later on in the film, they explain that the girls needed to have something personal that belonged to a dead person, the dead person that they want to speak to. And we see that Angela wears her mother's scarf to school that day. Her father notices it, isn't happy with it, takes the scarf back, leaving Angela without a personal item. So potentially the necklace was Catherine's personal item. Maybe it belonged to someone that she was trying to contact. This is what I mean about splitting up the story, because we may know Angela's motivation, but we don't really know Catherine's motivation. We know nothing about Catherine's motivation. Who she was trying to contact? Was she just doing it for fun because she heard it worked? Blah, blah, blah. So yeah, eventually the two girls, they start a ritual. We don't really get to see much of it. We see them light a candle. We see Catherine kind of swing the necklace that she's holding like a pendulum. And then suddenly it's that evening, and neither of the girls have come home yet. And both Angela's dad and Catherine's parents are both worried. They find out that both of their kids lied about where they were going to be. They ended up going to that other girl's house that Catherine told her parents she was going to be at. Of course, they weren't there. And then starts the police search. Once the parents fill out the missing persons report, the police then go into action, start scouring the forest looking for the missing girls. They don't find anything. And then some time passes, and we see a farmer. We see a farmer and his son at their farm, and there's a horse dead in the field. The dad tells the son to go get like a tarp or something to cover up the dead horse. While the son is in the barn, he discovers Angela and Catherine in the barn hiding. And, they both are kind of like, where are we? Blah, blah, blah. They don't really know where they are. Eventually, the police do come, pick up the girls, take them to the hospital. They are reunited with their parents, but then the two girls basically tell the same story. They have no idea where they've been, and they don't know how long they've been gone. Apparently, at one point, when Angela is being interviewed by either one of the police officers or one of the doctors, she thinks that she's been missing for a couple of hours. That's what it felt like to them, like they've been missing for a couple of hours. We then find out that they've actually been missing for 3 days. They've been gone for 3 days. And to kind of talk about a point that Mike talked about earlier, how heavy-handed this movie is, this movie doesn't give its audience any credit for being savvy whatsoever. There's the 3-day reference, which if you're a Catholic or even know anything about Catholicism, 3 days is a very specific reference, and that is the resurrection. Jesus was killed on Good Friday, and he rose on Easter Sunday, which technically is 2 days, but they always say it's 3, so whatever. So yeah, if you're savvy and you recognize the reference that the girls were gone for 3 days and, oh, hey, that's how long Jesus was dead before he came back to life, then cool. If you don't catch the reference, not a big deal. The problem is the movie is so heavy-handed that Catherine's mother actually says it in so many words. She literally is like, did you notice our girls were gone 3 days? Do you know who else was gone 3 days? Jesus, after he was crucified. It's like, really? Did I need that fucking explanation? Because like I said, if you were savvy enough to catch it, cool. But if you didn't catch it, no big deal. It doesn't hold any real bearing on the movie other than, you know, some religious connotation, that kind of a throwaway line anyway. So yeah, this movie just doesn't give its audience any credit for being savvy at all. And that's unfortunate. And that's probably why Reagan is fucking mentioned so much in this movie. Once Chris McNeil introduces herself, we know who the fuck she is, and we know who her daughter is. I didn't need to hear Reagan's name 24 fucking times in the movie. It's like they're constantly reminding us, oh, remember Reagan? Remember Reagan? Remember? It got so annoying after a while. Anyway, again, sorry, off on a tangent. Back to the movie. So, like I said, the girls have been gone for 3 days. And when they're back, they're not really themselves. They're very quiet, kind of standoffish, you know, not very talkative. Neither one of them knows where they've been. They just know that they started to play this game, and then they woke up in a barn and had no idea what happened in between that time. So that evening, unfortunately, Angela has a little bit of an accident. She ends up wetting the bed. Mike mentioned this scene earlier. It doesn't nearly have the impact of Reagan pissing on the living room floor in front of a party of about a dozen rich white actors and directors and producers, but, you know, whatever. So she ends up wetting the bed. The dad puts a shower together for her to you know, so that she can clean herself up. As soon as dad leaves her in the bathroom, weird shit starts happening in the house. Eventually, dad goes into the bathroom to make sure that his daughter is okay, and she's gone. She's not in the bathroom, and the tub is filled with like this black viscous water, almost like it's water and oil mixed together. He doesn't even make a comment on it. He doesn't even react, which is kind of odd. It's like, dude, that's black water coming into your bathtub and not even a reaction. Like he turns off the water faucets, looks at the tub for half a second, and then goes back to, you know, searching for his daughter. And then eventually he is attacked by his daughter. She actually grabs the scarf, her mother's scarf that her dad took away from her, wraps it around her father's head, slams him against the bed, and he hits his head, knocking himself out on the floor. And I don't even really remember how that scene culminated. I think it might have just ended with dad getting knocked out. Eventually we go back, you know, and like I said, we're going back and forth between the two families, which is why this movie just feels like it doesn't know what it wants to stick with. Do you want to stick with Angela's story? Do you want to stick with Catherine's story? Do you want to bring them together? Because they don't even bring them together until the third act. You know, obviously in the first act, when they leave school, they go into the woods. Yes, they're together. But I mean, after that, not until the exorcism scene at the end are they ever brought together to be questioned or anything. The other thing that I was very surprised about, and I don't know if this is refreshing or annoying, I'm still kind of on the fence about it, but the fact that no one questioned what was happening. Everybody, like Catherine's family was instantly like, oh, I think she's possessed. Like, she's acting like she's possessed. I mean, she was gone for 3 days. This is the same scene where she brings up the line about Jesus returning after 3 days as well, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, wow.
Well, too, and one of the problems I see is because in the original, you know, Reagan went through several layers or tiers before she was like full-on Pazuzu looking demon child. So it made sense why, like, the science community would be skeptical, why she was sent to psychologists, why they were doing all these tests, because she didn't play with the Ouija board and then 2 days later she was Pazuzu. This movie, these girls, after the 3 days and they return, I think it was like one night where they kind of acted odd, and then within like a day they were like full on possessed. So it's like, yeah, I'm failing to get the subtlety of why all the therapists or like all the naysaying took place in this one as opposed to the original. It didn't make a lot of sense.
I just made a discovery. As I'm looking through the credits, I'm noticing a character who I don't recognize. I just looked it up on Wikipedia, and it is the character of Lamashtu. Apparently, this was the demon in the movie, because when you look up Lamashtu on Wikipedia, it says in Mesopotamian mythology, Lamashtu was a female demon, monster, malevolent goddess who menaced women during childbirth, and if possible, kidnapped their children while they were breastfeeding, would gnaw on their bones and suck on their blood. So apparently, it is not Pazuzu in this movie. It is Lamashtu, and there's actually some pretty gnarly pictures on here too. So if you want to check it out, apparently no Pazuzu. It is Lamashtu. So I guess that kind of makes sense. And the fact that it is a female demon also makes sense, because all the quick shots of the demon itself are vaguely female. So that does make sense. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so back to the movie. After the girls are all back, they both kind of have a weird episode at the hospital, or not at the hospital, but at home. They both end up going back to the hospital. Both families take both of the girls back to the hospital because they both have weird episodes at home. And Victor, Angela's father, decides that there's not much that can be done. He decides that he does want to commit Angela, that he's of the agreement that this might be a mental issue, a mental health issue. So he decides to look for a facility to put Angela in. Catherine's parents are a little bit more Catholic, they're the church-going folk, so they're not really buying into the mental health thing. So they actually take Catherine home. So Catherine is actually home, and Angela is at a facility being looked at. Now, what ends up happening is one of the nurses who is attending to Angela has like a conversation with Angela post-disappearance, obviously. And during the conversation, Angela says the name of a nun, and you see the nurse instantly react like, oh my God, like you shouldn't know that name. We later find out that nurse was going to be a nun. She was literally days away from taking her vows to become, a nun. And she basically, she ended up fucking up. She got pregnant. She got together with a guy. She got pregnant, blah, blah, blah. So she ended up leaving the church. But like I said, she reacts to this name that Angela calls out. So eventually she goes to visit Angela's father with a copy of Chris McNeil's book. And she basically tells the dad, I was almost going to be a nun, and I never told anyone this. And before you become a nun, you're supposed to pick a name, and it's supposed to be a different name than your birth name, because it's supposed to represent the change into, being a woman of God. So the name that Angela spit out at the hospital was her nun name. And like she tells Angela's dad, she never told a living soul that name. No one knows that. No one even knows that she was pregnant and had an abortion. Like, literally, this is information that she never shared with anybody, but somehow Angela, possessed Angela, in the hospital knew all of this, knew her nun name, and knew that she had killed her child. So that's why instantly the nurse, Ann Dowd, the character of Anne, basically tells the dad, I don't think that it's a mental health issue. I think there's someone inside of Angela. That's when she then hands him Chris McNeil's book. Instantly, he thinks it's some kind of religious tome, and he's uninterested. But then she tells him, no, it's not religious. Please read it. And that's when he looks at the cover, and we see, I think the name of the book was A Mother's Decision or something like that. Or, yeah, something like A Mother's Something by Chris McNeil. He ends up reading the book cover to cover, basically realizes that a lot of what Chris McNeil went through with Reagan is a lot of what he's currently going through with Angela. So he decides to visit her at home one day, and, she's there, and he starts to talk to her a little bit, and he brings up Reagan. This is where we find out that Reagan and Chris have not had a relationship since Chris released that book. And it seems like that book is pretty old, because the cover, the picture of the author on the back of the cover is not Ellen Burstyn today. It's definitely more like what Ellen Burstyn looked like in the 80s. So potentially, if The Exorcist occurred in 73, 74, maybe the book came out in the late 70s, early 80s. Anyway, the point is that Reagan and Chris have not had a relationship since then. Reagan was pissed off that she wrote a book exposing her life to the general public. So she basically just disappeared. She literally disappeared from her mother's life. Chris has no idea where Reagan is. So, after talking back and forth a little bit with Victor, Angela's father, she decides that she wants to talk to Catherine. She can't go see Angela because Angela's currently in the mental health facility. But of course, like I said, Catherine's home because her parents didn't want to put her in any kind of facility. So she goes to visit Catherine, and literally the instant that she walks into the bedroom, she looks at Catherine and just goes, I know you. I know who you are, and you know who I am, and blah, blah, blah. And instantly, the possessed Catherine starts asking her, oh, do you want to know where Reagan is? We all know where Reagan is. All you have to do is ask, and we'll tell you where Reagan is. And of course, she doesn't play along. Chris doesn't want to play along. She's already dealt with a possessed person before, so she kind of knows the rules of not engaging in a conversation and definitely not taking their words as gospel. Eventually, though, possessed Angela ends up grabbing a crucifix and stabbing Chris McNeil in both of her eyes. I'm sorry, but how fucking disrespectful is that for a legacy character? I mean, the mother of Reagan McNeil, and you fucking have a possessed 13-year-old poke out both of her eyes. That was just so fucking upsetting.
I feel like her character was totally misused. Like, one, she wasn't even necessary, but I still have trouble with why she would even go there, unless, like Dawn said, maybe there'll be, if they go through with the sequel, we'll get more of like the purpose. But I'm like, the mom even stated herself, she had nothing to do with the exorcism in the original. Yep. So why when it's now someone else's kid? I'm not saying she wouldn't be concerned and offer sympathy and, hey, here's how we fix the solution for me, so look into this. But like, I find it very unbelievable that she's gonna go to the house and go in the room and talk to her, because it's like, what's the purpose of this? I don't get it.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I think she, more than anything, I think Chris just wanted to see it with her own eyes and just have the confirmation that, Victor isn't just an overly cautious dad, that, this girl actually is possessed, blah, blah, blah. Anyway. So after this, thankfully, Chris McNeil does not pass. She does not die from her injuries. Yes, both of her eyes have been poked out with a crucifix, but she's basically in the hospital with patches over both of her eyes, obviously blind for the rest of her life. So at this point, they make the decision to try to get an exorcist. Literally more than halfway through the fucking movie, they finally bring up the word exorcist, which, so upsetting. And they end up meeting this priest who, I don't know, he just comes off as this wormy little chicken shit that doesn't really seem like he's that into it. Not nearly like Damian Karras, who was like adamant that this girl needed an exorcism, blah blah blah. This one, luckily some of the members of the church do agree with them that potentially these girls probably do need an exorcism, but they also recognize the fact that exorcisms are just as dangerous for the possessed as it is for the exorcist. That, they obviously, from the original Exorcist, we know this, that both exorcists were killed off. Spoiler alert. Sorry if you haven't watched a 50-year-old movie yet, but yeah, both exorcists do die at the end of The Exorcist. And in this one, our supposed exorcist literally has like 2 throwaway scenes in this movie. One where he's talking first to Victor and Catherine's parents and basically agreeing with them that, he'd like to perform an exorcism. And then a scene where he's actually talking to the board, the church, and, the members of the church. And, like I said, they're talking about, yeah, we kind of agree, but we're still not sure that we want to approve an exorcism, blah, blah, blah. They almost make the Catholic Church seem nice. I don't know if that was a purposeful decision, but yeah, rather than making the Catholic Church look like, selfish or not wanting to be involved, it seems like they did want to be involved. They just knew the danger involved, so they didn't. And so they finally decide, okay, fuck it, we need to perform this exorcism. They make the plans. Basically, this exorcism is going to be very different than the exorcism in the original, because in the original, the only people in the room are the exorcists and the possessed. In this version, everybody is in the room except the exorcist, because he shows up right when the ritual is about to start, and he informs Nurse Anne that he's not going to be able to do the exorcism. The church did not give him permission because of the inherent danger and blah, blah, blah. But everybody else is already there and prepared, and they're like, listen, we're going to do this, whether you want to or not. And it's kind of cool because not only is there a Catholic presence there, there's also kind of that Haitian / voodoo presence there, as there is kind of there's a woman there who I believe she used to be a doctor, an oncologist. Yes, she mentioned that she was an oncologist. Radiation therapy, for those of you who don't know what oncology is. So she was a radiation therapist and then discovered, the healing power of the universe and blah, 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 stuff like that. So she's now kind of this practicing, I don't want to say voodoo because they never say the word voodoo in the movie, but obviously she's Haitian. She's doing a lot of stuff with herbs and talismans, and it looks very familiar. So that's why I'm kind of leaning on the word, but I might be incorrect. So like I said, everyone is here except the priest, the actual exorcist. There is a minister there, like the minister of that church, but he's not a priest. I mean, there's a big difference between minister and priest. So a minister cannot perform an exorcism. If you want to know why, go read your Bible. I'm sure it's in there. But they all decide, well, fuck it. We're just going to go ahead and run with this. So basically all the parents are there, Catherine's parents, Angela's father, Nurse Anne is there. Nurse Anne has actually been given permission by the priest. Like, he tried to empower her to convince her that she could run the exorcism. So the person who actually runs the exorcism in this movie is not a licensed exorcist, isn't even a person of the cloth. It's literally a nurse who almost became a nun. So there's that whole suspension of disbelief you got to deal with. So anyway, yeah, they start the exorcism. Basically what they do is the Haitian priestess lady draws a circle on the floor with a bunch of like other circles inside of it and different designs, things like that. And they end up taking a couple of chairs. And I actually did find this one thing clever. Instead of just putting the chairs on the floor, they actually drilled them to the floor so that they couldn't float up. I thought that was kind of clever. Like, that would have made sense if Chris McNeil would have been there to say that oh, by the way, you might want to nail those chairs down because they're not likely going to stay on the floor. So anyway, like I said, they nail down these 2 chairs that are in the center of this chalk circle that's been drawn on the floor. And our pseudo exorcist, Nurse Anne, starts, doing the incantation, starts reading the words. Our two possessed girls are asleep in the chair, but within a minute or two of Nurse Anne, excuse me, reciting these passages, the rites of exorcism from the Bible, they both wake up. They both, and this is where the movie just gets so goddamn cliche. Like, how much more of this whole thing with these kids speaking in weird, crazy, doubled languages, speaking like the most vile shit ever, injuring themselves constantly. In fact, they even did the "help me" gag from the original. If you guys remember, in the original, they saw the word "help me" kind of pressed into Reagan's belly from inside of her belly. Like somebody inside there was basically spelling out "help me." In this movie, it's actually written out in wounds, in knife wounds. It's like carved into someone's belly. We don't actually see who it is that's displaying the "help me." All we see is a picture of we see a close up of the girl's torso, and we see "help me" carved in. It looks like it carved in with a razor blade or whatever. And then Catherine, of course, has an upside-down cross carved into her forehead. Ooh, so edgy. Yeah, we haven't seen that before. Jeez. Mike's a metalhead. You remember that guy? You remember
we really
the
lead
lead singer?
Cross with the upside-down cross.
Exactly. Yeah, like we needed that shit. But
like we don't already know what's going on here.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Like, this is why stuff like Metamorphosis and When Evil Lurks, it's so much more original, because they're not leaning on these old tropes. The possessed in When Evil Lurks isn't some disheveled, dry-lipped, covered in cuts type of person. It's actually something completely different, which is original and refreshing.
Yeah, this turns into Conjuring the Exorcist.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh God, big time. Okay, so again, our girls are now awake. Nurse Anne is still proceeding with the rite of passage. And then just as she's getting to like a major, like the music is swelling and, we get the lights are flickering, like all the traditional exorcism tropes are happening. Our fucking priest out of nowhere just decides to come in, and literally the moment he did that, it felt like a WWE run-in to me. I don't know how many wrestling fans we have listening, but in wrestling, like whenever a good guy wrestler gets jumped by like 3 or 4 bad guy wrestlers, and then like another good guy wrestler runs into the ring to save him, that's what this felt like. It felt like these two possessed girls were basically had the upper hand on everybody in the room, and this guy kind of runs in, and literally as soon as he starts chanting his prayers, the girls start acting violently. They start reacting violently, almost like the words that he's saying are working, and it almost seems like he's gonna kind of change the tide and make everything kind of go the right way. But suddenly, nope. Both girls basically look at him and they both start to turn their heads, almost like they're going to do the head turn that Reagan does in the original. But instead, the priest's head is the one that gets turned all the way around backwards. We hear the snap of his neck, and then he just falls over. The two girls are still strapped into the chairs, and they're laughing their ass off, blah, blah, blah. And then this is the part of the exorcism that just gets so fucked up over the top that I almost walked out of the theater. This isn't hyperbole. I almost walked out of the fucking theater. At one point, the Haitian priestess lady like grabs some alcohol, takes a swig of it, and then spits it into the fire. They have a burning fire in the room, like a fireplace. She spits it into the fireplace, and these flames come out of the fire. At the exact moment that happens, we see smoke start to come out of the girls' mouths. And we start hearing these voices, like these distant voices. We can't really tell what they're saying, but we know that you're hearing voices, almost implying that the smoke that's coming out of these girls' mouths is the demon. And when the priestess...
It's the Shining being sucked out like Dr. Sleep.
Oh, my God.
I don't know how else to explain.
Yeah,
the steam. I was like, what in the world is going on here?
I was so disgusted. I mean, my pretty much from this point to the rest of the movie, my face is in my palm. But I could not get over that this is where my fucking favorite franchise has gone to. One of my favorite franchises has gone to. Fucking supernatural CG crap. Not even in any kind of shape, just literally wisps of smoke. So what ends up happening is after the priestess spits the alcohol into the fire, the smoke that comes out of the fire engulfs the mist that the girls were spitting out, and then suddenly it's all sucked into the fireplace, like zoop, all of it is sucked in, and literally everyone in the room thinks it's over. They're like, is it over? Is it done? And then finally both girls end up waking up. They're still very much possessed. They're laughing their ass off, and at this point we get kind of, not a twist, but kind of the how this whole thing is gonna, how this whole exorcism is gonna end. We hear the girls basically in the demon's voice say, make a choice. One girl must live and one girl must die. And the demon is asking the parents, make your choice. Catherine or Angela, who lives, who dies, which, oh my God, my eyes almost rolled out of my head. My eyes rolled so hard. I couldn't fucking get over it. But obviously the smart parents, which is Victor, Angela's father, and Catherine's mother, they both kind of understand what's happening, and they both are like, don't make a choice. No one make a choice. Now, Catherine's father, who's been a wishy-washy little bitch this whole fucking movie, he wasn't even on board for the exorcism. Like, he doesn't even want to be there. He's sitting outside the house. And then finally he decides, okay, I'll go in and I'll participate. He takes off his shoes and socks like everyone else in the room did, puts on this talisman that the Haitian priestess lady gave everyone. And it's like, now he's participating. But then after the demon kind of says, make your choice, live or die, Victor, Angela's father, goes and gets the scarf, her mother's scarf. Again, like the whole catalyst, or at least I feel like that's what the movie's implying, but poorly. He goes to get the scarf and he gives it to her. And he says, look, it's your mother's scarf. Remember, this is what you wanted. I'm so sorry for denying this from you, blah, blah, blah. But then suddenly Angela's able to break out of her restraints. She rips out of them, and she does, the traditional possessed float. She floats up in the air in the middle of the room. And basically both of the possessed girls are kind of screaming in pain. And you still hear the demonic voice say, make a choice, make your choice. One must live, one must die, blah, blah, blah. Finally, Catherine's father, the complete douchebag that he is, out loud says, I choose Catherine. And obviously Victor and Catherine's mother look at each other like, oh, fuck, he fucked everything up. And of course he did, because this is a demon we're talking about, the deceiver, the king of lies. So what happens after Catherine's dad makes the choice? Well, it ends up that both girls' heart stops. It almost seems like they both die right when the dad picks Catherine, when he says, I choose Catherine to live. But then suddenly we get a scene of the night that they disappeared. And basically Catherine is kind of transported back to that spot in the forest underground where, their shoes were found. And we hear a demonic voice go, I choose you, Catherine. Almost like he's punishing Catherine's father for making that decision, for making the selfish decision of sacrificing another person's daughter. So the demon basically takes Catherine. And yeah, that's it. Catherine is gone. Catherine dies. At this point, both girls are dead. Both hearts have stopped. But then suddenly Angela comes too. Angela's heart starts beating. She wakes up. And, and I forgot to mention that during the exorcism, it is revealed that back in Haiti, when you remember that when Victor's wife, his pregnant wife, was injured and he had to make the decision of who to save, the wife or the child, this is where we get, during the exorcism is where we get the reveal. Obviously, because of the way that the movie progressed, most of us assumed that he chose the child. As it turns out, no, he told the doctors to save his wife and to sacrifice the child. Somehow the mother ended up dying on the operating table anyway, but they still were able to save the child. And of course, the possessed Angela spits this back at her father. You wanted me dead. I was unwanted, blah, blah, blah. And, during the scene where both girls are saying, make your choice, the possessed Angela is basically daring the dad to choose, the other girl. You wanted to sacrifice me 13 years ago. Here's your chance. Do it. But of course, because of Catherine's father's douchebaggery, he goes and chooses Catherine. Of course, the demon lied about the choice, ends up taking Catherine, and then Angela ends up not only surviving the exorcism, but actually going back to normal. We end up seeing her in a final scene, one of the final scenes of the film, where she's going back to school. Everything is normal. Everything looks awesome. And then we get our epitaph, our finale, our final scene of the movie, where it's Chris McNeil in the hospital. She's there, obviously blind. Both her eyes are gone. She's got eye patches over her eyes. Someone walks into her hospital room. We don't see who it is right away, but I think those of us in the know instantly knew who it was. And of course, the person bends down, and it's fucking Linda Blair. It is Reagan, out of hiding. She must have heard about what happened to her mother at the exorcism and decided to come back and help her out. But yeah, there's Reagan. And to me, that was the best fucking scene in the movie. I know people are going to call that fan service, but I've said it before and I'll say it again. Fan service isn't always bad. When you're talking about one of the greatest movies ever made, at least in my opinion, a little bit of fan service is okay. I'm very on board with that. And that ended up being my favorite scene in the whole goddamn movie. A fucking exorcism movie. And my favorite scene is an estranged mother and daughter coming back together. That does not bode well for your film. And that's pretty much the end, folks. Our movie ends there. No post-credit scene. That is The Exorcist Believer. And thank God I'm done talking about it.
It did not make me a believer.
Oh, God, Believer. And even the subtitle, Believer, it didn't really even have that much bearing, because I think what they were trying to imply is that Victor, Angela's father, was not a religious guy, and that he didn't believe in heaven, hell, God, or the devil, any of it. But here is his daughter being possessed. And I figured him not being a believer would play a bigger part in this movie, but it ends up not. Because of Catherine's selfish douchebag father, Victor doesn't even really have to make a hard decision in this movie. Some other idiot makes it for him. So yeah, the title of The Exorcist is incorrect. The title of Believer is incorrect. I'm just going to say this whole movie is incorrect and just should not have been made. Like I said, it's not the worst movie.
The decision to make it was incorrect.
Oh, by far. But like I said, I don't know. I feel like David Gordon Green hit a home run with Halloween 2018. It's not a 10 out of 10 by any stretch, but it's a solid movie. And I feel like
compared to the stuff he's given us since.
That's what I mean. I feel like the success of that movie got to his head, and he thinks that he's improving all these franchises and making them better. And it's like, dude, no. Now, granted, the one thing, and I mean the one thing that I will thank David Gordon Green for, is that this is a sequel. When we first started hearing talk about this movie, we heard that it was a remake. And let me tell you something. I would boycott a remake of The Exorcist. I'm sorry. I feel that strongly. I mean, it's my favorite movie. That's not hyperbole. It is literally my favorite film ever made. You tell me that the guy that ruined Halloween is going to remake The Exorcist, I would have told Don and Mike, I'm not watching it. We're not reviewing it, and I'm not watching it. But since it turned out to be a sequel with returning legacy characters, I decided, okay, I'll accept it. Because no matter how bad a sequel is, it'll never ruin an original. Not to say that a remake does, but just Sitting in a theater watching a remake of my favorite movie ever made by a hack director would just piss me off to no end. And like I said, I was very close to leaving this movie in the middle of The Exorcism, but I looked at my clock and I saw that there was only like 10 minutes left in the runtime. So I'm like, all right, fuck it, I'll stay. But yeah, I really strongly wanted to leave. And that's saying a lot from a hardcore Exorcist fan.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Right.
I don't blame you.
Oh, God. Can we talk about When Evil Lurks now?
I was going to say this. If you guys are willing to pull double duty, what do you say we get together Wednesday or Thursday and do that one?
I am very down for that. I mean, there's so many movies coming out. I mean, yeah. Because, I mean,
like I said,
we can do VHS.
like I said, if you want to...
I'll have to look at my schedule, but yeah.
Like
what
I said,
actually comes out this week coming up?
There's nothing in theaters this week. I thought there was something every week in October, but actually, no. It's November that we have something almost every week between Thanksgiving and, the movie Thanksgiving, not the holiday, and a couple of other movies that I saw being released on the 17th and 24th of November. We're probably going to be in theaters more in November than October, but there's no, limit on movies. I mean, it's October. We've got mad movies coming out. Obviously, if we decide to get together later this week and do When Evil Lurks, I will absolutely go see it again because I just love that goddamn movie. Spoiler alert. And then maybe next week we could do like VHS if there's nothing in theaters, just to keep up our track record of always reviewing VHS movies. We've never missed one since we've been a podcast, so I wouldn't mind keeping that streak going.
Well, like I said, I mean, that was my idea and proposal was maybe like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday do When Evil Lurks, and then maybe Sunday, Monday do VHS 85.
I'm down. Like I said,
it's
up to Mike's schedule.
I mean, like I said, that was the proposal I was going to make if that was fine with you guys and your schedule. So, I mean, taking off-camera conversations to on-camera conversation.
Yeah. I was going to say, we're doing this live, aren't we?
But that's what I was trying to...
Since nothing's coming out this week anyway in theaters, we can make it our next episode anyway. So what night we specifically cover it, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
like
know my
I said,
schedule
that was
for the
my
week
thing.
yet, but...
Like I said, yeah, that was my thing was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If you guys are free, do When Evil Lurks, and then Sunday, Monday, depending on your schedule, do VHS 85. Because that would technically still be new because I don't think there's anything... There is something on Shudder. I don't remember what it is because I know Shudder's got one every week, and then I know I think Hulu's got something the last week or two because I know that they just
yeah. And then Never Hike Alone 2 came out this week as well, which I know is a fan film, but it's like one of the best fan films ever. So
yeah, because like I said, I know Hulu's got something coming out. I know they just dropped that new time traveling slasher film.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So I know that they did that. I know that they also announced that there's going to be something else coming out that they're going to release. And I think Netflix has something coming out.
Yeah, I would imagine most of the streaming services are going to have something original out in October. Obviously, the big boys, but, I wouldn't be surprised if Tubi has a couple of things and, Screamcat or whatever the hell that other horror service is. Screambox. So, yeah, we've got options regardless.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But anyways, that's going to wrap it up. And hopefully I will
for those of you that are worried about what our conversations are like off camera, there you go.
Yeah.
Trust me, that probably should have been more entertaining than Exorcist Believer.
All right, Venom, what do you got? Anything new for people to listen to?
Actually, no, nothing. I'm still waiting. I think this week I'm going to be recording my guest spot with Cut to the Chase for their Thrills and Chills series. My movie is Bordello of Blood. I'm actually going to rewatch Demon Knight as well because I haven't watched Demon Knight in like 15 years. So I'm going to go ahead and watch them both so that I can, be a little bit more prepared for the show. And then that's pretty much it. I think we have an idea of what we want to do for the No More Room in Hell Halloween special. We've already started conversations on that. So we'll definitely have a Halloween special out before the end of the month. But as far as new shows in the last couple of weeks, nothing from me.
All right. How about you, Don?
So yeah, due to unforeseen circumstances, I was supposed to have recorded with Dan and Lacey for Thrills and Chills, but that got postponed. So I think we're still in this rescheduling phase. I'm going to be doing Exorcist 3. So
Nice.
yeah, we'll see, but I think my take on that one is a little bit controversial, but it should be a fun time. And yeah,
I'm always down for some controversy.
Not always.
Yeah.
But...
But other than that, the only other thing for me, I might be doing a round robin bracket with some friends of mine. I don't know the date for that. I believe it's gonna be next week, although I don't know the date. It'll be recorded either the 21st or somewhere in there. I'm not sure, but it'll be a bracket of slasher films. So we're gonna have a random assortment of slasher films to talk about. Since I don't know the recording date, I haven't heard much else other than that, so I don't even know what films we're covering. But I've been with them before, and we've had a lot of fun, so I'm looking forward to that one. But yeah, other than that, the only other thing is season 2 of Horror Countdown. So yeah, go back and give that a listen. Yeah, I guess that should be pretty much it, unless I get confirmation on the slasher tournament. I think that's pretty much it for me.
All right. As far as I go, yeah, I got Thrills and Chills coming up sometime soon. I'm doing Pumpkinhead 2. And the only other thing I got is No More Room in Hell 56 is finished, and it's off to the network. Well, it will be tonight, this evening. So that should be up probably within the next couple of days. I would imagine you're listening to this first, because if they are both available, I'll probably post this one just to get this out. But it will be this week, and we discussed 2 Japanese horror movies versus, and what's the name of the other one, Venom?
Origami. Not origami, but origami.
Origami, right. Same director. So if you haven't seen either of those, check them out, and that'll get you prepared for the episode. But otherwise, yeah, that's it for me. Venom already mentioned the Halloween special we're working on, so we'll get that recorded sometime in October prior to Halloween. And with that said, thank you everybody for listening. We will be back with hopefully a more fun movie to discuss shortly. So let's say bye to our listeners.
I said it once, I'll say it again. Fuck you, Jason Blum and David Gordon Green. Later.
I'll jump on that same sentiment and say, stop giving David Gordon Green money, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, and please cancel the trilogy.
God, yes. God, please.